Hello, and welcome to Further Comments. Hey, Horace, how are you doing?
Hey, Damien, doing well. Guess what? We have a special guest today.
Do we really? Who is it?
So there's a special guest today. His name is Conan Hines.
Oh, I
Conan
think I know that
is,
guy.
do you know
In
that
fact,
guy?
I do. He's a really smart dude.
Yeah. He calls himself Legal Tech Dad.
Yeah, that he is definitely also a TikToker extraordinaire.
Conan, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I like how you pretended I wasn't here for a while and then I just appeared for you guys. Great to be here.
It's a podcast. Nobody can see you.
Oh,
We're going to be doing something a little bit spicy today, which is a debate between the two sides of the generative AI spectrum. On the one side, you have myself and Conan, who's going to be debating that large language models have reached their peak. We're not going to see much more improvement from these foundational models. Make do with what you've got. Let's make the best of it. And on the other side, we've got Damien, with the help of one of the LLM of his choosing, that is his partner in this debate, who's going to be saying, this is not the peak. It's going to continue improving. It's going to get better and better. And we're only at the start of this enormous growth, this fourth industrial revolution, if you like. So, Damien, how are you feeling about being supported by only a bot?
I was initially feeling like I was outgunned with the two humans against the one human, but now that I feel like I have a bot that has near infinite intelligence on my side, I think we're equally gunned because on the other side with Conan and Horace, that is near infinite intelligence on that side too.
well, I was going to strongly disagree with that. I actually think Horace drew the short end of the straw here, but it was his idea, Damien. So he'll have to live with this decision, and I hope to not be too embarrassed by the end.
It is going to be fine, Conan. Look, if Damien's using anything like a strawberry on O1, he's not going to give us a response for another 5 minutes. Just wait.
That's really funny.
But the first point, I'm going to raise the first point of this debate, which is the foundational technology that has been created today by OpenAI, by Anthropic, by a number of other major players. The capability of these models seems to be plateauing. And I'm not going to make the argument on the affirmative side first, but Damien, I'm going to throw to you. Tell us what your thoughts are if I raise the argument we've reached a plateau.
So I think that if past is prelude, and it often is, that if we look to history to be able to try to predict the future, then we should look to the history of Moore's law. And to be able to think that people are saying, well, why are you going to need any more than 128K of RAM ever? And now here we are with many hundreds of times that. So Moore's law has consistently made things better and better on the hardware side. And so then if you also think on the large language model side, you have GPT-2, which had a small data set, and then 3, which had a much bigger data set, and 4 with a much bigger data set. And then, of course, what's reputed to be being trained right now is like a 10x on top of what 4 did. If you think past is prelude, that GPT-2 was a preschooler, GPT-3 was maybe an elementary schooler, and then 4 was a high schooler that beat the bar exam, at least according to some metrics. And then, the most recent O1 model has beat PhDs in physics. I don't know if we've really reached a plateau. And, you can argue whether the plateau is because of the foundational model's data or whether the plateau is because of algorithmic gains that were done to be able to tweak with those. But I don't know if what we're counting is a plateau of performance. I don't think the plateau of performance is had. And I guess we can debate as to whether the plateau is to data availability. And that I think is a different question.
And I think that's right. I mean, Damien, I think that's where we have to look at is it a data issue or is it a compute or algorithmic issue? My understanding, some of the reading I've done is we're running out of the data. Even 10x training on 10x of the data is not as big of a leap as I believe 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. So, and studies I've read have gone at maybe 2027, 2028, we're going to start to run out of data. In fact, there's been agreements with Reddit to train on that data. Is that going to move the needle, or YouTube data, which is probably really the last edge of the landscape of any usable data? I'll let Horace answer more on the algorithmic compute side, but I don't think compute, and that's not what you said, Damien, but I don't think more compute is going to really do much for us. And I do think, the transformer model, even when it came about, I think it took 5 years to get the ChatGPT. So even if we got the next transformational technology tomorrow, I'm skeptical if it would be useful for another several years. And I don't see any whispers of that in the air or hear any whispers of that in the air.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, I haven't heard anyone talk about like the next leap in terms of like a research a paper, but doesn't mean people aren't working on it. I just don't think they've got to the point where it's ready. For me, the reason why I feel like there's a plateau is if you actually map out the intelligence scale of these language models, everyone kind of maps it on this kind of linear chart that goes from GPT-2 to GPT-3, GPT-4, GPT-5, so kind of like projection straight up. Um, the actual scale of these charts is logarithmic. So if you actually map it out properly, the curve very much follows a sort of like a plateauing. And if you extrapolate on that scale, more training data, does that mean you're going to break this sort of pattern that's happened already? Maybe, maybe not. But then you go to the data itself, and we are reaching the point where we are pretty much done in terms of the human created useful data. Now we're tapping into synthetically created data. And synthetic data, well, is that good? Is that bad? Or is that just getting itself into a death spiral? Um, I think for me, the most convincing argument for why we've reached a plateau in the performance of large language models is the architecture of the models itself. It is fundamentally a next word predictor. It has no real understanding of logic. It has no real understanding of causality, spatial awareness, anything else that humans tend to be aware of. We know there is like an argument that maybe it has some internalized model of logic, internalized model of the world structure, but that's not explicit. And it's really hard to be able to pull from the model, from the weights, what that understanding is. So all of that is a very complicated roundabout way to say, I think so far the architecture of these machines, the unavailability of further training data, and the trend that we're moving towards suggests to me that the capability of these models are probably reaching a peak or have reached a peak.
I'm going to counter to think about. So there's the data itself. That is, have we exhausted all the available data? Has that data itself plateaued? So one could imagine that there's a lot of arguments saying, all right, everybody has plowed through the entire internet. We've exhausted as many books as we can, at least until the lawsuits have been shaken out as to whether you can ingest
Mhm.
all the books or not, right? So let's assume that the available book corpus is now exhausted. Then people say, what next? Like, what else? What other corpuses can we do? Because what these large language models want is high quality human created content. Does Reddit provide high quality? Maybe, probably not, right? Right. So there's a real question as to whether Reddit satisfies that. But there's a pretty massive data set of high quality human created data. You know what it is? It's called the court system. Every day,
Mm.
judges are cranking out all sorts of high quality, human created, logical opinions that are based on actual non BS evidence, like you might see in Reddit or Twitter, etc. So if you have logical, human created, high quality content cranked out by courts every single day, that's a pretty good corpus for the foundational models to be able to make things better. And how much better would the legal reasoning be if the GPT-5s of the world and the Geminis and the Anthropics ingested court data? How much better would that be for everybody? So that's number one. Number two is not just the judicial opinions, but also motions, briefs, pleadings. That's another pretty good corpus of high quality human created data. Also, it turns out we have a bunch of government workers in the entire .gov website. That is agencies providing high quality human created data. All the executive branches, Congress, and all the judicial branches like ingest all of that data. So anyway, so I don't think we've exhausted that, and it turns out that that is a near limitless supply as long as it's human created of that high quality data going forward. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is even if we have plateaued as far as the source data, if you believe Mark Zuckerberg, and that's a big if, of course, he said that with the most recent Llama release, they just kept running the compute. And as they were doing testing on running the compute, it just keeps going up and up and up and up on the same data that they'll just run the training, and it just goes up and up. And he said, and we stopped it not because it's plateaued, but we stopped it because we just needed to release it. Where's the asymptote, right? Nobody knows, according to him. I'd wonder what you think in response to that, saying if we ingest court data, number one, and if we ingest all the motions, briefs, pleadings, and the entire .gov website, that's all new data. And if we just keep training and training and training until we find out what the plateau is, isn't that a lot of headroom for us to be able to keep going?
So 3 points. One, I agree with you that training on specific domain data might be really useful. There was a paper last year or earlier this year called, I think, Textbook is All You Need, which kind of goes to that point. Second is, I think there's two things going on here. One is further training and further inference. So more computer training time seems to improve, just like you said, the Llama models found that, and more compute at inference time allows you to have these reasoning models like O1. But my kind of overall point is no matter how good you're getting with these large language models, fundamentally what they're doing is next word prediction. They still have no causality. They still have no awareness of the broader world mechanics and what's going on. And so there needs to be something else before we reach intelligence. And so maybe that's the dividing line between us. There's a difference between intelligence and more useful versions of today's models.
I'm interested in what Conan has to say, but a quick rebuttal of that is that thinking about my friend Dazza Greenwood from MIT has introduced me to the duck test. I don't know if you know what the duck test is, but machine learning people think about they know what the input to the black box is. They don't know what happens in the black box, and they know what the output is. But if the output looks like a duck and it quacks like reasoning, then maybe what's going on inside the black box matters less. So right
Um,
now, during this discussion, I don't know what's going on in Horace's brain. I don't know what's going on in Conan's brain. But what comes out of your mouth looks like reasoning and quacks like reasoning. Then that's maybe what I should gauge it by. So even though it's next word predictor, if it looks like reasoning and quacks like reasoning, then maybe it doesn't matter if it's actually reasoning or not.
so I had that exact same argument with someone else, and Conan, I'll throw to you right after I share this story, which is this works really, really well if what you're doing is observing the duck quacking and waddling. But the moment you ask, can you fly, duck? Can you fly? And it doesn't, that's when you know it's not a duck. We simply haven't asked it to fly yet.
Yeah. And I also think maybe where we didn't start, if we back up, is what are we thinking it's going to accomplish? Because at the end of the
Mm.
day, we can have more compute and better algorithms and more quality data. But what are we thinking? I probably would throw it to you, Damien, because if it gets better at next token prediction, that's great. I don't know if Horace and I are disputing that. That'll be a little bit better. Maybe the hallucinations go down, and it can be more reliable, or you can have it more tailored for different use cases. But ultimately, I don't, see it being a reasoner at any point using this tech stack. And so curious, Damien, what do you think, if there is more headroom, what do you think the next level up that's going to be a visceral improvement over what we have today?
So the if you think about it's always compared to what, as every data scientist says, compared to the first year associate, compared to the fifth year associate, compared to junior partner. If again past is prologue, then I think that we're going to continue seeing either through increased data availability or increased tweaking, whether it's chain of thought or otherwise. We're just going to keep compared to what is always going to be accelerating. If we continue accelerating at the same pace, then how soon before it overtakes all of us?
So yes, I guess let's clarify a baseline here. So today, if I'm advising lawyers on how to implement Gen AI today, typically I go, it's either you do it going in or you do it coming out, right? You need to get started. It's a great place to get going. It's also great to scrutinize what you've developed, and I think in a case like a VLEX, it can help you along the way, pull those really important juicy nuggets for your argument or your negotiation. I think I'm comfortable with that, and I think we can get lawyers there. Going to the next step, I mean, what does that look like? That looks like actually doing some sort of analysis beyond just kind of getting the ideas or doing the quality control from the back end, doing some of the middle work. And that I think requires inputs that aren't available on the internet. I mean, there's a lot of intangibles that go along. I mean, you have what's the disposition of the partner? What's the relationship with the client? What's the current representation of the geopolitical situation as it pertains to this specific set of events or set of facts that we're trying to undertake, right? That I think is almost where the gut is still going to beat the LLM models unless you spend a lot of time telling it about all this stuff. So that would be where I think it would need to go for me to call it a next level up.
Yeah, I think, what you're going to is really where I think that the humanness is really all we're gonna have left as the machines keep doing more and more of the drudgery. So, for example, I used to have to research for 12 hours, and now Vincent allows that to be a minute and a half task to be able to do all that drudgery, right? So what's left is the humanness for me to explain that memo to the client. So I think that, yeah, there's a lot of intangibles, like you say, that is, what is your charisma? How is your ability to take complexity and make it simple for your clients? These are all intangibles that maybe the large language models will not be able to replicate. But I would also say that what we've been talking about during this conversation is a difference between what the large language models are capable of doing versus what humans are capable of doing. And that is different than what humans actually do. And my explanation is that somebody who uses Vincent told me, he says, it doesn't do anything I couldn't do, but it does things that I just didn't have time to do. It does stuff that I wouldn't do. So it's not that I couldn't do it, I just wouldn't do it. So now does all the things that I wouldn't do. So really the question is, does the model have to continue its accelerating and it keep an exponential curve if it can do things faster? Maybe it's at the same level as me, but just does it faster? Then it'll do something not that I couldn't do, but that I wouldn't do.
I'm going to take that in a different direction now, which is one of the things I hear a lot about large language models and AI in general when people are buying things is they're like, well, we don't know if it's good enough. We don't know how good it's going to get. We're going to wait. One of the things I like to kind of raise, very much like what you've just mentioned, Damien, is, well, is a large language model or is a product good enough to solve this specific thing today? If it is, who cares where it's going to go in a year or 2 years' time? You can use that already today to benefit what you have to do to be a productive human being or productive business person. And so very much like that, the direction I want to take us in now is to say, forget the foundational technology for a second, because that could continue improving or that could store. That's up for debate. The products themselves, do we believe that the products themselves are going to continue improving? Conan, do you think the products and legal tech are going to continue improving?
Well, first I want to just play off what you said earlier, and I think was
Please.
the impetus of this whole discussion and me kind of like by brute force joining your podcast is that the frustration and the unhelpfulness of the rhetoric around what's coming. It's like if I give my kid a double scoop chocolate ice cream with sprinkles and they're like, no, I'm going to wait until you can give me hot fudge, or I can have 5 scoops on one cone. Maybe that's the metaphor, which is, ill advised, right? For a 6-year-old to hold a 5 scoop ice cream cone. So, I'm going to wait for that, but like you could just have the 2 scoops right now. And that's probably more than you need anyway. I think that's where this all comes from. And yes, I think it's an open question. But it's like, why don't we just use this amazing technology that kind of vaporized 2 years ago and see what's possible? Because that's what it is. I think we all agree human engineering is what the new innovation is going to be. We now have this great tool. We've gone from the hammer to the nail gun, and how are we going to start changing our methods to best unlock the potential? So what's going to, our tools going to improve in legal? Yeah, absolutely. They're going to improve. To me, it's been the tools that come out that are sort of fresh on the market with no history or indication that they have some sort of deep understanding of the workflows that we've all been spinning our wheels on for a decade or more, uh, which is huge because as I think as you were saying, I'll play off what Damien was saying, I've written about this too, and how like it's not just it is the drudgery work, but it's also the enrichment, right? The enhancement to my work. I can ask a lot more questions. I can get a lot more insights and a lot more um, benefit for my client in less time, right? At a high level, but you have to be sort of a senior, experienced person to be able to use it that way. If you're just on the lower and less experienced, you'll be able to do some of the drudgery work, but that's about where it's going to stop for you. So what you still need people who understand not just the workflow, but all those intangibles, the way that law firms operate and work, and bring AI in thoughtfully. Bringing AI in, I think, is the easy part, understanding the workflows. how to make that. It's the hard part, things that we've been doing all along the way. So as we get comfortable with it, as firms get comfortable with it, hopefully as our clients get more comfortable with it, the AI will seep into products that understand what they're trying to accomplish. Like I'll end with this. I mean, you asked me a few years ago, I would say, most law firms should not be software development companies. And I'm backing away from that now. I think, I'm not saying every law firm, but I'm saying, I think the breadth of law firms that could actually develop software, that's useful, helpful, and much more cost effective has wide.
I really like that. It makes me think about the barrier to entry for any software development right now is much, much lower. I litigated for about 15 years. And one of the reasons that my former employer, whose name you know that I'm not going to say, but everybody knows who that former employer is, one of the reasons they hired me is because they said, you actually sat in the seat of a lawyer. So you can be able to help during the whiteboard discussions, actually push us in the right directions to be able to do this work. So part of my work was to be able to build requirements, saying the software has to do this, that, and the other thing. And I would write a long list of requirements that then would go to the developers for them to build. Turns out those requirements I was writing are now prompts. So really now all you need is subject matter expertise. That is, I'm this type of lawyer in this jurisdiction trying to write this kind of document. And now I write the requirements of what that needs to be. That is my prompt that now goes out the door. You don't need hundreds of developers to be able to implement your wishes. So I think that's absolutely right. The magic, if you will, is subject matter expertise, and lawyers and law firms have that subject matter expertise. So that's my point number one of three. And point number two is to Conan's really good point about what's coming up down the pike. Often we think we're just waiting for Godot because I don't know if the foundational models. There's only three entities in the world that know what's coming next. Nobody else knows. So really, everyone else is just waiting for Godot. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe we don't. Only those entities know. But of course, I know what I'm building at VLEX with my team at Team VLEX. Horace knows what he's building at Team VLEX. So if what's coming is what's coming out of Horace's product or what's coming out of my product, I know exactly what's coming. So I can say with confidence that what's coming down the pike is pretty cool. Of course, Conan doesn't know that because he hasn't been in Team VLEX. But the real question is, do we trust Meta, Google, and OpenAI to do the curve? I don't know if I do. But the question is, do you trust Horace and Damien that we're actually telling the truth? That's another question. That's point number two. Point number three is let's assume that we stop and freeze in time. So GPT-4 and GPT-01 is going to be the maximum that we'll do. We have now hit a plateau. We now, as a legal profession, still have years worth of exploring all the use cases of these things. I personally have dozens of workflows, and within each of those workflows, collectively, there's like 100 plus tasks that I'm just in the pipeline to be able to push out the door that I'm going to keep building with Team VLEX. So let's assume we just freeze in time. There's a whole lot of legal work to be explored, even if we just freeze in time.
So I think all three of us are aligned that even if we differ in our view on whether the foundational models are going to improve, the products themselves and how we apply these foundational models are going to continue to improve. And there's a lot of opportunity there for us to focus our time and effort to make sure it delivers impact to the end users. And that actually raises a question we had in the last podcast, Damien, that we have not answered, which is, as the customer of these tools, how do you decide what to buy in a market that is really muddled and noisy and where everybody promises to sell the same things and have the same functionalities and there's actually a convergence of features? So we're really lucky to have Conan here, but Damien, I'll throw to you first because I noticed you want to say something.
I do. And Conan is the only voice of the customer we have in this podcast. So yeah, I also want to hear it. Casey Flaherty has said that the signal to noise ratio is very low. That is, there is a lot of noise to the signal, and that signal is getting drowned out right now. So for the customer's perspective, if you see just a bunch of wrappers around GPT or wrappers around large language models, that is very noisy, therefore disheartening. Therefore, people are in the trough of disillusionment. So I would say that as the industry, that is, as consumers realize the emperor has no clothes with those wrappers, then maybe those wrappers go away, leaving only signal rather than noise. But I'd be interested, Conan, what do you think about signal to noise ratio and what the consumers are hearing?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll try to keep them succinct for this. One of the things I see in the industry when I see law firms building out innovation departments or some with very mature innovation departments is they're not all cut from the same cloth, right? They, even very large ones, are a lot of times they're outside of the IT department. IT has the keys to the tools you need to really understand and play with this technology for pretty cheap, very low barrier to entry, as we've talked about, to just play around with the technology. And even if you don't develop your own software, it's very important to actually scrutinize the vendors coming up and ask hard questions of them. My perception from the outside of some firms is they need to buy a SaaS product because that's the only way they can do AI, right? They don't have strong relationships with the IT department, who may or may not be doing anything with homegrown AI. So that's one. You need to build a competency in this. Do not rely on the vendors. And don't get stuck in FOMO, because this is a human engineering exercise. This is really something that people like myself, and I think everyone on this podcast, has been thinking about for a long time. And I think the disillusionment is that we actually still have to work on our data. It doesn't really change the things that we've been saying for a long time. And what, Damien, you've been leading, Sally, and bringing research to the next level. You've seen it all along. I think that's some of the disillusionment there, is there's still hard work to do. To answer your question, Horace, after all that roundabout, is, and I've just been working on this content. I just presented last week on this, on marketing legal tech with savvy, not hype. And then when I really came to the floor, I said, it really should be marketing legal tech with personality. And every company has a personality. I'm not even saying there's a right or wrong approach, but you have to have an approach. It can't be vanilla. What I said is, it can't be vanilla. Promotion is polymorphic. So there's many different ways to promote and sell your product as one of the 4 Ps of marketing. If you're just doing sort of out of the box, like wrote LinkedIn posts and going through the motions, I don't see how we're going to tell. Because at the end, when I told the vendors in the room, there were a bunch of legal tech startups, and I said, I can't tell from your user interface what it's going to look like in 12 months or 24 months. Damien, you might know what yours is going to look like in 12 months, 24 months, but I can't tell. So that's off the table. Now I need to know who you are. Why are you here? I'm going to try to remember this, but what's the culture of your firm? What is your vision? What's your commitment? We're all trying to get out of the tradition of law, but if you don't understand it and respect it, you're not going to make much headway in this market. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to make my users happy, but I'm certainly not going to risk my reputation and my job to push some sort of magic AI product that I don't know really where I'm going to start with it, or if it's going to be useful for a very high cost.
I really like that. So I have 3 points, and I'll go reverse chronologically by what Conan has just said. One of which is change management, and that is very difficult, as everyone knows. Lawyers are backward looking. That is, we in our jobs look to precedent for value. We also in our jobs look to what has been done before with the business of law, and looking forward to doing something new is very hard. So we often need to meet our users where they are. Sometimes that requires putting square pegs in round holes, and that is essentially making the tech do something what might seem backward to appease this backward-looking lawyer, but that is the right move, because that is how change management happens. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 that is really good is, of course, we need to work on our data. We've known that. Garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have well-tagged data, and it turns out Sally has really good tags, and it turns out you can do a lot of things programmatically. If you then tag up that data, that well-tagged, well-structured data plus large language models does better than either of them separately. So you need that well-structured data along with the large language models to be able to do good work. So that's my point number 2. Point number 3 is that there's been a lot of talk about the neural symbolic combination. Neural nets, large language models, and then symbolic AI, that is good old tagging, good old-fashioned knowledge graphs, what's called good old-fashioned AI. And the combination of those 2 things is better than each of them separately. An example of that is I was just did a co-keynote with Pablo Redondo of Casetext, now with Thomson Reuters. He and I were talking about how, for example, that neural symbolic combination is citators. So you can imagine asking a large language model, hey, tell me whether Roe v. Wade is good law. That's one way to do it, and the large language model is going to hallucinate. Another way is just to code up that Roe v. Wade was overruled by Dobbs. And if you've coded that up with the symbolic AI, then the large language model will be able to benefit from that, saying, oh yeah, Roe v. Wade was actually, so a citator is a way that you're not going to rely on a large language model, you rely on data structure. And that's example number 1. Example number 2 is you can imagine if a knowledge graph says that maritime negligence is a type of negligence claim, and it's a type of maritime claim that is argued in admiralty court, which is related to the area of law that is admiralty law, that is related to the industry that is the maritime industry and the shipbuilding industry that is related to the asset that is ships and watercraft. So you can imagine if you've built out those connections, then the neural net can be able to follow those connections down. And so that if you have a questions about watercraft, you could follow that all the way down to maritime negligence. And you could do that through symbolic AI, that is actual explicitly stated relationships. So the large language model doesn't have to work as hard and actually can give you a much better output. So this neural symbolic connection, clean up your data, create really rich symbolic inferences between that data so large language models can go through it. That I don't think is going to plateau anytime soon. I think we're going to continue on the exponential.
And see, that for me is one of the criteria you would apply one of the hard criteria, if you like, that you would apply when you're choosing a vendor, right? Like someone who's thought about all of that, someone who's built all of that, someone who's considered that. But I think Conan's point, which I really like, was there's a soft side of that, which is you have to find the right people. There's a story I was thinking about. There was a company about 12 months ago. I saw them on LinkedIn. They got VC backing, like $5 million, $10 million, Series A or seed. And their sole purpose for existence was to create a system that allowed them to have legible text on AI-generated images. That was their sole purpose. Now that's been solved by pretty much every image generation company. But that $10 million still went to that startup company. And they're still probably building something today. And they're probably looking at the next problem that needs to be solved. And so the VCs who made that bet probably knew that this problem is not going to be around forever and this company may or may not be the one to solve it. But the people who are in that company are the ones who are worth putting money behind because they'll continue to pivot, they'll continue to learn, they'll continue talking to their customers until they find that problem that will be worth the return the VC is looking for. So kind of like how VCs make bets on startups, I think, Conan, it sounds like you're making bets on the right partners to develop these solutions for you.
Yeah. And this was a forum with startups, investors, and buyers. And you really crystallize it for me. I mean, that's what you are. You're an investor at this point. Because, I mean, look, we buy products from Thomson Reuters and we buy products from Latera. That's not part of the equation, right? The products work. Are they doing what they need to do? How much you increase in the price and what new features have you added? And then we go along with our day. And that's totally fine. We need tools like that. Table stakes tools that we know that work, that everybody in the industry use. They're not differentiators. If you're trying to be a differentiator, you're working with startups, something that I'm dipping my toe in. So I'm not a grizzled veteran here, but I speak to a lot of them, and you are an investor. You're investing in the people. This is a relationship business, and there's only so many people we have time to work with. It's who's going to be in the long run. Nothing to do with whether you exit in a few years or not. But if you exude something that makes me think that exiting is one of your highest priorities, that's going to not probably land the right way with me.
And that actually goes back to what Horace and I talked about in the previous podcast, talking about trust is very hard to gain and very easy to lose. As a lawyer, I said in the previous podcast, a senior partner said that a reputation takes a whole career to be able to gain and just takes one moment to go away. So one can imagine if you're a law firm that has put your trust into a vendor that then loses that trust, it's very hard to regain that trust. So yeah, human side is very important to retain as a vendor. That's point one. Point two of two is that we talked about Horace's really good story about that company was just chasing a really small thing, images and having very legible text, and that goes away. It reminds me of Sam Altman saying that if you're trying to essentially go around the edges of what GPT-4 is not doing today, we're going to steamroll you because that will be remedied with GPT-5, et cetera. And again, goes back to the question of credibility. Do you trust Sam Altman to actually continue the exponential, or has Sam Altman plateaued? But I think there's a lot of dumb VC money that is going to throw money at going things around the edges. And that will then, maybe that company will pivot to the next thing, and maybe they won't. Right now, the industry is awash in money. And I wonder how soon before that settles out. Maybe not for a while.
Well, maybe Damien, you should ask the leadership or the ex-leadership cadre of OpenAI and see what they think of whether we should trust Sam or not. But Oris is asking a lot of questions here. I want to ask Horace a question here on this
Sure,
topic
please.
because you have a personality, 100%. Anybody doesn't know, then they're just not paying attention. Like you have a personality. I don't think of Cynthia and Horace as different things, and I think that's a testament to what you've done and how intentional you've been. Right? I remember meeting you. I was pretty new at Clifford Chance. It was definitely like 2018, 2019. You were very early on.
2018. Yep.
2018. Were you even living in New York yet? I don't even know.
I was visiting.
You were visiting. You were still, I guess,
Yep.
in Australia at the time. Just seeing the journey, and you were a lawyer before. So, like, when you set out and you charted out your company, and it was less about features. I'm sure you've pivoted. I know you've gone down because I know one lawyer you've gone down the road with that was total dead end. And so what was the thought process there, and how's that evolved over the last 6 years?
Oh gosh, this is a really big question, and I'm gonna try and answer it as quickly as I can. So give me 15 minutes. With the company itself, I think about it in several layers. At a foundational level, like what do I want the company to achieve? It is happy customers and a happy team. And if we do that, then we're going to create a good product. We're going to be focused on our customers. We're going to be developing things and building things that is going to serve our customers' needs. From there, we then look at the mission of the company. And that mission actually changed a few times, or rather, it got refined a few times by looking at the externalities of what does the market need? What's missing? What are people screaming for? We then align with here's what we need to build to help our customers be the best that they can be. So all of that's a really kind of like fluffy philosophical way of describing what we do. Fundamentally, are trying to bridge the gap between data and workflows. How do we transform things that already exist, documents, contracts, whatever, into reusable blocks of information to then supply to lawyers to bolster their knowledge and their expertise when they're working. So Conan, to answer your question more directly, what is it that drove me to do this? What is it that we're focused on, and why have we pivoted and changed? It's because of the relationships we've had with the customers. It's absorbing from the people around me. And it's this symbiotic relationship of like, if you think it's important, then I want to solve it for you. And then building that into what we're doing with our company, which is why we've got like 5 different products now.
I want to ask Conan, we've been talking about trust and legal tech vendors and trust. What does a legal tech vendor need to do to obtain your trust? And to be able to say, what is the messaging, what is the personality, and what does the product need to do to obtain your trust?
The short story is you have to be you got to be cool, right? You got to be like not a stiff, right? You have a long-term play in mind, right? There are people that do exit probably quicker than they thought. That's a rare thing. That is not the norm. I think legal tech companies today, I think casting a wide net, but you want to avoid the wide net problem, right? Find your customers. All right. Yeah. Big law. Okay. There's a lot of different customer types in big law that do different types of work. My firm is not one of the top 10 revenue generating firms, but in a couple practice areas, we are at the top. Right. And so knowing that and saying, do I want to go to Fried Frank? Do I want to put them on my exclusive list of customers that I really feel I can make a difference for them? Because you're only going to have so many people and you're going to have so much time. Right. So you have to really pick wisely and then invest deeply. Right. I want to have coffee with you. Right. I want to have a meal with you. I want to text with you, silly ideas about AI. I want someone who actually gets geeked out about this stuff. Right. Like we should be all geeking out together about this. It's just a hard journey and it can be fun. It's not fun if the people I work with aren't fun. Right. Because it is cool. I mean, this is amazing that we all get to work in this amazing time. I mean, I left legal practice over 14 years ago because I was just like, we're just doing all this document review stuff. And this doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm not even a computer person. And this doesn't make any sense. So I want people who, whether you're in it now or you've been in it for a while, that you're here with purpose. And that's how you build trust. And so, not worrying about when we sign the deal, but worrying about, if I'm continue to be more invested, because the more I'm spending time with you, the better chance it is I'm going to work with.
I love it. One way that we could do this is we could end the podcast with that overwhelmingly uplifting and really heartening thing that Conan just said. Um, or we
What's
could
the alternative, Damien?
or we could continue the
Yeah.
debate that we were supposed to have at the beginning. And I'm a litigator after all. And there's a joke that arguing with a litigator is like wrestling a pig, in that you both get dirty and the pig actually likes it. So let me end not in the nice, warm, touchy feely that Conan did, but let's end with the debate. What Conan said is I think conventional wisdom to be able to say, I don't want to go with a vendor that is going wide. I want to be able to go narrow and be able to say, this is the problem that you solve. A question for both of you, maybe to end this, is maybe that might have been the traditional thinking, that you need to go narrow, find your people, and be able to do that. But maybe does large language models, do they change that? In the past, I would have, Damien Reel at this large legal tech vendor would have written some requirements, then had to have a bunch of coders implement that. I need to go narrow because that's a necessity. But in today's world, where the SME, you could have dozens of SMEs making all the things rapidly. Does it really make sense to go narrow, or can you just go wide and do so many things because now the technology enables it? What do you think?
Oh, do we leave that unanswered?
I have an answer, but I was waiting for you to go first, or I'm happy to jump in there. I mean,
My very short answer is, Damien, you have to go narrow.
yeah. The reason why you go narrow, if we're now in this world, look, like I said, we're going to buy from Thomson Reuters. There's always going to be stuff we're going to buy from certain large companies. Yeah, I believe for the foreseeable future. The companies we're talking about are those ones that need to get revenue, right? They're creating the new products. And 2 points. One is, like we said, all the products are starting to look the same. They're going to just look more the same. I think Richard Troman's just came out with something about legal tech convergence and how all this is overlapping. And I think that's going to become more the norm than not. And we'll see how that all plays out. I have no idea how that will play out. The point from there is, the second point is, I want influence over your product. The reason why I won't develop all my software is because and the reason why I don't want to buy everything from a big box legal company is because I want influence. So you can have the greatest LLMs and stuff, but I want to be able to sit there and tailor it to my secret sauce and what my lawyers really want. And I think actually maybe the third point that probably plays more off the first point is that I think you can do what you're saying, Damien, but you really have to have a differentiating product. You have to have a product that nothing else is doing. And those seem to be short-lived when they do come out.
Look, I think it's a race, and you've only got certain resources and energy. If you spread it out and try to create a platform that services everyone and does everything, you're going to need a lot of resource to keep that ahead of the game, to keep that ahead of your competition. Most people don't have infinite resource. So focus on the things that make you better, triple down on those things that make you better, deliver on them, make happy customers. For me, if I had infinite resource, I would say, yes, Damien, let's create a platform that can do everything. But it's a finite world.
It's true. And I think that maybe is a nice way to be able to end the podcast. Conan and Horace, this has been a great fun. And I like debating, but this didn't seem as much as a debate as just a good talk between good friends. So thank you for being my good talk with the good friends.
There's only so many things you can say about an unknown, right, Damien?
Right, that's right.
There's only so long we can debate about stuff we can't ever prove until, probably years from now.
Yeah, Horace and I on LinkedIn were having a debate as to when the billable hour, when 90% of the billable hours will go to flat fees.
Yes.
And it's easy to be able to say when you don't give a time horizon, just saying, yes, it will eventually happen. And that's where I stand.
Well, I can sign up on that, but I think that's pretty far down the road.
Well, next time we have a debate about unknown things or known things, I think it'll be much assisted if we were holding a beer or a whiskey. So let's make that happen. Conan, Damien, thank you for joining this podcast.
I would love to do it live. I would love to do a live chat at one point.
Awesome.
New York
Thanks so
City,
much, everybody.
16th of October.
And indeed, 16th of October. All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone.